morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to one of the last sessions between the amazing keynote that's going to happen with OGS and our guests from Google. My name is Tomas Vetrovsky, and I'm Director of Product Management here in MobileIron. And among my responsibilities is working on the platform that's called Windows and the associated devices. For those of you that have been here last year, you may have heard my talk about what we are planning for Windows 10. It has now been almost 14 months, and we have learned a lot of new things in terms of what companies are doing, what's going well, what's not going well, what are the biggest challenges. And that's what I'm here to share with you. In addition to learnings that we had over the last year or so, I had dozens of meetings with customers here one-on-one as part of the conference. And one of the things that striking me that what I have here doesn't have to change, that it's not specific to customers that we have talked to, but it's a generic state of the market and the knowledge that is needed in order to successfully deploy Windows 10. Before I start talking what we see as the important aspects, I want to share a little bit more about me. I have worked for a number of years in your roles. I worked for Microsoft IT for close to 4 years. I spent 5 years running IT at Intel. And I have seen how things have been done essentially ever since Microsoft introduced the Active Directory in 2000. I worked for a number of small companies and I provided consulting prior to that. And one thing that's very clear here is that the mobile way of doing things, the rapid deployments, the updates are coming to desktops. So the first important item, if I can get my clicker working, is speed. It was almost 36 months between Microsoft releasing Windows XP and introducing Windows 7. If you look at the data that Gartner has, it was more like 42 or 44 months that it took companies to transition from one OS to another. Last year, I have shared the information that Microsoft provided that is no longer in place, and the average time between Microsoft releases will be about 3 months. Microsoft released the first version of Windows 10 in July of 2015, and they adjusted the strategy a little bit, I think, based on enterprise customer feedback. So in July, we had a release that's called Threshold 1. At that time, Microsoft didn't have enough resources. They only made it available for desktop. However, that was an anomaly. In November of 2015, they came up with another release that's called Threshold 2, and that's essentially started the regular cadence because it was released that's available for both desktops as well as mobile devices. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that the form factor actually doesn't matter. It's more of the functionality. So Microsoft has a desktop SKU, but that desktop SKU is running on devices like Microsoft Surface, on the tablets, which is very different from what you are used to seeing from Apple or Google. We are due for another release called Redstone 1 that will have some features that were already pre-announced, such as EDP, Enterprise Data Protection. That's Microsoft's solution for the container. And we will have a second release, Redstone 2, in fall of 2016. And based on the information that we have right now, this is the regular cadence. So you guys essentially went from 3-year life cycle between major releases of Windows to 1 year, or if you count the second following release, to about 6 months. And many IT departments are basically struggling with how to adjust for this. What is made a little bit easier is that when you look on the consumer side, the consumers are getting used to this much quicker than anyone expected. One of the things that I hear quite often is our users are not capable of handling the changes. And that's essentially a false statement, because when you look at iOS, they are on a very similar cadence. The users are used to downloading. What is important in your roles is that you make the change or the upgrade transparent. Microsoft has a number of different tools that will help you do that. The upgrades are not coming in forms of ISO. You don't have to touch every single device. You don't have to recall it to your depot and do it on behalf of the user. You just need to accept the fact that what used to be Patch Tuesday is now major OS update. And that will make your life much easier. Another thing that comes with the major upgrades of Windows is your need or your desire to test every single application that you have. Yesterday, we talked with one of the large customers here, and they told us that they have 8,000 applications, and that it's going to take them probably 2 years before they are ready to adopt Windows 10. And when we started to dig deeper, we found out that they are already on Windows 7. And there are statistics, there are data that can be used to essentially prove that the application compatibility between Windows 7 and Windows 10 is in the high 90s. There are very few applications that will break. And that again talks to the speed in which these companies can adjust the process and start deploying much faster. Now, that model or that rapid deployment is not suitable for every single PC in your enterprise. And I love the approach that Gartner started to talk about last year that was developed at the end of 2014, which is called bimodal IT. And essentially what it says is that there are two different modes in which IT operates. There is the marathon runner, and the CIO is paid for reliability, for essentially not changing the environment. It's the matter of if it's not broken, don't touch it. And on the other side, you have the sprinter, where the CIO is paid for or is measured based on innovation. So what we are essentially saying is that if you have Windows 10 devices, desktops, laptops, or tablets, and you have system of records, you should still operate in the marathon mode. You should not upgrade the OS. You should not take the fast path. However, when you have devices that are customer-facing, devices that need innovation, devices where you can differentiate from your competitors, those should be in the sprinter mode. You should not deploy using the traditional models. And as you will see, as you may have seen from my other colleagues, the EMM management and deployment is much better suitable for those devices. Because no matter where the device is, you can reach to it, you can update it, and you can start moving faster. One of the questions that I get when I talk to the customers is, what is our recommendation in terms of the split? And the answer always is, it depends. It depends on your enterprise, it depends on what you do. One of our customers is a manufacturing company, and they have Windows devices controlling their CNC machines that actually create parts for cars and airplanes. Those guys are not going to upgrade in the sprinter mode, and majority of the devices will be in the marathon. On the other hand, we talk with the bank, and there are people, and the majority of the employees are customer facing. For those, we see the split being almost 80 or 90% being managed by EMM and being in the faster deployments. Now, the OS itself is essentially irrelevant unless you can apply this model to application development as well. I have not seen anything coming from Gartner or IDG, but I would expect that as this becomes more common, they will put out best practices for application development. For example, if you have a number of different devices, if you have iOS, Windows, and Android, you will most likely be selecting frameworks such as Xamarin that allow the developer to write a single app, compile it for all of devices, and again deploy in this rapid innovation mode. You may have new features coming every month or every few months, and essentially match the OS deployment. The second thing that's very important to consider as part of Windows 10 is the new security model. And the best description that I can say is that with Windows 10, Microsoft is the first OS provider that have taken the mobile approach, the mobile architecture with application sandboxing, and applied it to desktop and laptop devices as well. So let's take a look at a little bit more detail at what it means. In order to manage a traditional Windows 7 device, you have a number of different components: antivirus, imaging, patch management. You would buy from a number of different vendors. In the Windows 10 side, this essentially does not need to exist unless you have legacy apps. So what is happening here is that EMM is providing a dynamic security model in which you take the device posture. Is the device encrypted? Does it have antivirus? Who is logged onto the device? And you apply that to your business rules or security rules that you run as part of your infrastructure. The other item that really changed here is that you have application whitelist and blacklist. It was almost impossible to prevent on Windows 7 device user from taking a USB stick and installing their software. One of the tries or attempts to prevent that was removing the administrative right from the user. But in most cases, there were ways around it. With Windows 10, if you have application that you never want to run on the device, such as Facebook, you just blacklist that application using the EMM model, and you as an administrator are guaranteed that the application will never run. The signature will be always compared at the execution time, and the user cannot do anything. They cannot rename, they cannot modify the app. You have essentially a guarantee. And that applies in the other mode as well. So if you have a device that's essentially running in the whitelist mode, and you have only approved Microsoft Office, your Salesforce application, and maybe time tracking application, only those that will be running, and there is no way around that. So the model that you are used to seeing on iOS and Android was essentially ported into Windows. It was improved and modified. The other thing that is changing is that previously, the way how you manage Windows 10 devices, especially in the security side, you have taken the device and you joined it to the domain. It was the domain join model. And it worked really well because all of your infrastructure pieces were on premise. You essentially, before the device connected, verify the state of the device. These days, it's very common that at least one of the enterprise services is running in the cloud. And at that moment, the domain join model does not essentially work. We had a customer that has over 400,000 devices that are running Windows 7, and they decided to move to Office 365. And they came to us and they essentially requested to backport the EMM protocol to Windows 7. We cannot do that. We are not Microsoft. But it drives the need to pair the cloud deployments with the correct security models on the clients and the devices. And as I mentioned multiple times, in the mobile space, we have learned how to do this. And regardless of the device or manufacturer, Windows Phone had the security model for the last 4 years. And now you have that security model available on your laptops and desktops. So while your desktop group may say, that's not the way we do this, we are managing this using domain join, go back and challenge them. Ask them, can you whitelist only 5 applications and be guaranteed that those are running? Or can you prevent any app that we don't want from running? And you essentially get to a dialogue that will help you to start a conversation. The other thing that we see as part of the security model here is that in the traditional Windows 7 or Windows XP state, the security was centered on the device. We have to secure the device. We join it to the domain. And that prevented a number of different scenarios, from BYOD to being flexible as people move from one group to another. In the modern side, this is centered on the individual. Who am I? Where am I? What do I need to do? Those are the models that you will be thinking about as you learn and start to deploy your Windows 10 stack. Now, the other thing that's related to this, it's not part of my talk, but I want to mention that, is that as part of these shifts, you will also change your technology provider landscape. Your vendors that you are using today, being it HP or Unisys, who is doing your PC servicing, will either have to transform and match the new deployment model, or very likely you will select a different provider. Because we don't see a need, for example, for imaging. Imaging can be completely removed from your process because you don't image a mobile device, you don't image iPhone, and now with Windows 10, you can essentially take the device, the user enters their email and password, and everything from application to settings to certificate is provisioned for the user automatically. So again, it's a different mindset, a different deployment, and it will change. And the data that we have is that some companies will go faster, some will go slower, but that change will happen. And I think that the number is 80% of companies by 2020 will use this new model. Now, something else that comes up very often is, how do I deal with these changes as part of my IT organizations? There is something interesting about the slide that I have put up. And you can see that all of the birds are following the first one. But if you would watch the birds sitting down on the water, you will see that it's not the same bird that gets up first every single time. It's kind of random. But what happens there is that all of the others will follow him. Unfortunately, we are humans, and we don't have that behavior. So by nature, we want different things. And your goals as a mobile team will be very different from the goals of the desktop management teams. When we did a survey during last year, we have found that less than half of our customers have a single team managing mobile and desktop devices. And in many cases, the only connection was at the CIO level. And this is one of the main reasons for the politics or the issues that we are seeing. And it's understandable. In many cases, it's a fight for a budget. It's a resource question. Who is going to get more? So of course, it's in our best interest to make sure that you, as a representative of the fast change of the mobile way of doing business, win. And one of the things that you can do is reach out to your colleagues and show them why the way of doing things are better. We had a number of different sessions here to show you that. Mark Cavins talked about our capabilities on Windows 10. James Saturnino was showing what we can do with Office 365 and Windows 10, including IoT. Pavel Zeman was talking about the applications. All of that content will be available to you. And if you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We have a lot of experience doing this in your shoes, as well as building the product, and we are more than happy to help. But this is one of the main things that I see there happening right now are essentially, I don't say fights, but conflicts between the different groups and different paradigms that exist. Now, it's very simple for me here to be on the stage and talk and give you there's a straight line from Windows 7 to Windows 10. The reality is that all of the different roads that are on the picture will be yours. You will take shortcuts, you will take setbacks. You will learn and you will make mistakes. And that's part of what we do as well. If you look at how we used to develop software 10 years ago, there was a spec, there was a plan. I, as a product manager, have put up requirements, and then we started to build. And we had an end product at the end. These days, the way how we do it is that we get the best ideas that we have. We do a very rapid prototype and proof of concept. We show it to you, you give us a feedback, and we change our thinking. That type of mindset, what we have learned essentially from the agile process on the development side, needs to come here into IT as well. And that brings me to another thing that's important to consider: flexibility. In many cases, and I think that you have heard this from our keynote speaker on the first day, the Queensland Police Department, IT departments have the tendency to plan and never execute. So for us, it's more about what I mentioned: learn and go. One of the flexibility examples that we hear that are coming up is that the security policies for the Windows devices must be different just because. It's a different OS. Imaging was an example of a process that is not existing on the iOS side, yet in many cases it's being deemed as required on the PC. Internally, inside our own MobileIron IT department, we had the same discussion. We need a local user on our Windows 10 device. And we asked the questions why? Well, because we may need to. But the access to the data is available from the cloud, it's available from the other systems. And it's something that may not be needed going forward. I talk a lot about PC imaging. And the main reason is that we have a data that show that the cost to image a PC is anywhere from high teens, $18 or $19, to high 20s, 27, 28, 29 bucks. If you could take that cost and you remove it, and then you start to look at how many physical touches are needed to configure things like VPN or Wi-Fi configurations or deploy certificates, and you take the device, you enroll it to your EMM provider, and all of those are essentially removed. There is a very good reason to change that process and maybe even change the vendor. Yet in many cases we see things like, oh, we have a contract. We cannot even start thinking about that. Well, you can. Go back, renegotiate. Be flexible. Really think about what you have learned here at the conference or from what was happening in the industry and start applying that inside your enterprise. And I talk about the waterfall versus agile. And we have a slide that I use with every single team presentation. It's all about baby steps, right? We started with Windows deployments of Windows, managing Windows software 4 years ago. I joined MobileIron in summer of 2012. And initially, we only had the basic MDM. We could provision email. When we added the application of the deployments, again, along the ways that we have learned, Now we essentially have a system that allows you to manage any Windows 10 device, regardless of the form factor. From the Raspberry Pi that may be running your thermostat, through Windows Phone, tablets, laptops, desktops. We support even the large Microsoft Hub screens, the 80-inch screens, and we have a customer that's starting their deployment. We are working with Microsoft on the HoloLens, and we would never be able to accomplish such a wide range of devices that we can support if we would just be planning. It was all about making releases, listening to you, and making changes on that feedback. Other things that will be very common when we talk about Microsoft is Microsoft Stack. This is an example, a very complex slide that Microsoft puts up, and it represents just their Azure side. And essentially what you will hear quite often from the Microsoft sales is, if you are using Windows, you should be using everything Microsoft. They are moving from a stack that was existing on the desktop side, where they owned the OS, they own the developer, they own the infrastructure, to shifting the enterprise customers to the online stack, to Azure. We will give you Office 365. As part of that, you may get the EMS suite that includes Intune. We want you to run your servers in our data center as well. And while previously I believe there were much larger benefits, these days it's all about sales. So we essentially say the Microsoft stack, especially in the online space, has no need for existence. We have demonstrated over the last 6 years as a MobileIron that it's all about best of the breeds, and that you as a customer not only have the right, but that you should strive to choose your best vendor for specific applications.